Okay, good morning. My name is Carol Friend, and I'm with the Type 1 Diabetes Experience. We're the diabetes support group here in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming out on a Saturday morning. And we are here to provide support to people living with diabetes. We started out as a grassroots Type 1 diabetes support group, and we've expanded our mission over the years to support any person living with diabetes because we think it's such an important societal impact right now. So one of our main missions is to provide education to the public and to physicians regarding the use of low carbohydrate diets and their effectiveness and safety for use with type 1 diabetes, any type of diabetes, and just for health in general. So with that being said, I'd like to inform you of some of our programs that we have. Since we are not doing so many in-person diabetes support events, we like to provide a lot of support online. This will be videotaped. You'll be able to access it again. And we also have a book program that is very important to us because we feel that knowledge is power. So we'd like you to take advantage of that and make sure that you give us your email address. And if you see any of the books out there that you'd like, put one of those down and Jordan will make sure that you get it. And if you're listening to this on video, we feel the same way. Give us your email address and we will provide you a book. So with that being said, one of the main reasons that it's so important is that most people living with diabetes right now are unable to meet the targets that are set for their HbA1c. There are so many people that are well above those A1c targets, which leaves them at great risk for developing diabetes complications. So that is one of our strongest missions, is to provide education for people to have the tools to be able to meet those targets. So I'd like to introduce, I'm very pleased to have Jason Arbusto here, the chef from Daughters and Sons Pizza down on 5th Street. And we have his spread in Lynchburg Living here available today, so you can get a good look at that. And Jason is a Virginia native, and he actually went to high school right here in Lynchburg. And in his years of learning his trade as a chef, he has traveled around the world. He's been to France, Las Vegas, San Francisco, and I'm not so sure how we got lucky enough to have him land back here in Lynchburg, but we're so pleased to have him here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody. I want to show you how to prepare several dishes using pretty much the same products that you could find at any grocery store and kind of adapting those into very many dishes. So what we're going to start out with, what's going to take the longest amount of time. I'm going to show you some different chef kind of tips here and there as we go along. I like to use chicken thighs. Okay, these are basic skin on boneless chicken thighs. They're fairly inexpensive. You can find them anywhere. And we're going to make several different dishes with that. What I like to start out with is I always season this overnight. What you want to do is you want to season it with salt and pepper pretty liberally, thinking that it was a little over-salted. You're not seasoning it, you're basically trying to marinate it a little bit. Salt and pepper, some oregano, a little bit of olive oil, and some garlic. I always like to put some aromatics in there. You can use garlic, you can use some onions if you like. You can chop them up, you can crush it up, it doesn't really matter. But you really want to put a good amount in there. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to toss this in here like this. You want to get it nice and mixed up. So chicken thighs, really easy. I like to put them in Ziploc bags as well. Super easy. Pop them in the freezer or pop them in the refrigerator. All right. And I already have some nicely prepared for you. Magic, right? So they've been marinated overnight, which kind of tenderizes it, lets the salt get into the center of it. And I kind of like to crowd the pan a little bit. Don't be afraid, they're going to shrink down a little bit, and all that fat on the skin and around it is kind of going to soak up around the edges, and it's going to confit it, which means cooking in its own fat, a French technique. And you can use oregano or marjoram or anything you really have. If you don't have oregano, it doesn't really matter. It's just a basic kind of form to give some flavor to it. And as you can see, the skin nice and crispy. What you want to look for is when it kind of falls off the bone like that. Real easy, tender. I like to cook it at like 325, start a little hotter, 325, 350, which will melt some of the fat on top to start off with, get it a little crispy, and then I drop the temperature down. And it takes around, I don't know, around 2 hours, 2.5 hours. You can also do this in a slow cooker overnight. So if you wanted to, if you're gonna do it in the slow cooker, you won't get any of the browning on top. So what you can do is you can put it in the oven around 350, get the browning, and then put it into the slow cooker and let that go overnight. One of the reasons why I like to use chicken thighs too is they're very forgiving. You can kind of overcook them or undercook them a little bit and they'll still be great. But the way to test it is you just want to like grab a piece and just see if it falls off the bone, just like that. So it falls right off the bone. And the salt has gone all the way into the side of it. It's been nicely flavored. The garlic has flavored the oil and you're ready to go. So we're gonna do several dishes with the chicken thigh today. I'm gonna put this aside, let it cool down. I also have some that are still warm up there. And we're gonna do several dishes with cauliflower today. So head of cauliflower, you can actually eat everything on the cauliflower too. These little pieces on the side, these little leaves right here, you can peel them down. Slice them really thin, or if you have a mandolin, you can slice the mandolin down. I've got pretty good knife skills, so I can do it by hand. These little pieces can be put into a bowl and add a little bit of salt and pepper and a tiny bit of lime juice, acid and salt. So what it's going to do is kind of cure these up a little bit, and then become soft. And you can put these in a salad. You can add them anywhere you need a little bit of acidity. But I like to use kind of everything. There's no real reason to waste any part of it. And then cauliflower. So I usually take a little tiny paring knife, and I start to take off the bottom pieces. Like so. And cauliflower is fairly inexpensive. You can find it almost anywhere. And we're going to use this as basically like a substitute for rice in a cauliflower rice. And we're also going to use it as a substitute for potatoes. So we're going to steam them up and blend them up. I like to just cut it in half and then take my paring knife again, cut out the center. And you want to break it up into pieces that are fairly regular and fairly small so they can cook a little easier. You can also put this in there, or you can cut this up, sear it off and braise it. Every little piece can be used. Also what I like to do sometimes.
Does it have a different flavor, Jason?
Cauliflower always, the stem in France, they call this the marrow of the vegetable. So it does have a lot of flavor, not as much as the outside, but when you roast it, it does develop a little bit of browning. It does give really good flavor. You can also make a cauliflower steak. So I like to cut the centerpiece like this. Some of you have been to maybe one of the restaurants that I worked at. And that you just take a pan, you sear the bottom off, sear the top off. So I'm not going to do it this time, but I'm just going to show you what needs to be done. So you take a pan with some hot olive oil, a little butter, you sear one side off, then you flip it, put a little chicken stock in there or butter, put a cover on it and put it into the oven, 30, 40 minutes. And then you want to test it. You just put a knife into it. If it comes out really easy, it's done. And then you can use all the other pieces to do different things. So you can braise these pieces, roast them up individually, make cauliflower rice, puree them. But it kind of just adds a dimension to cauliflower, where you can have several different dishes with cauliflower. You can have the stems on there for a little bit of acidity. You have the roasted steak. You can have the roasted puree. You can have some rice. So you're basically working the cauliflower to the maximum potential. Yeah, that's cauliflower.
I think, Jason, a NutriBullet won't really get it into the rice consistency, right? It would be good for mashed cauliflower?
The NutriBullet, I haven't really tried the NutriBullet yet, but if you're trying to make the rice, which I'm going to show you, there's two different ways. If you don't have a food processor, you can use a box grater.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things I want to do is want to show you how to do several different things, using basic things you might have at your house. If you don't have a food processor, you don't have a fancy Ben ringer to make the noodles. I've got another smaller device that you have, but you can just grate it.
That's how I started out years ago.
And you can also grate the stem. It's a little less regular, but it does the trick. So you get kind of pieces like this. I'm going to do it in the food processor, it's a little bit faster.
Yeah.
All right. So I like to break them into pieces, about that size. It kind of cooks a little faster, makes it a little more regular cooking. You never really want to have too big of pieces and too small pieces. They won't cook regularly, and some pieces will be a little more mushy than others. So we're gonna start off making the cauliflower mash or the cauliflower puree. Really, the difference between a mash and a puree is just how thick or thin it is. It just kind of depends on what you like. If you have a little more time, you want to puree it, you can puree it up into a blender, make it nice and really smooth. If you want to pass it through a sieve or a tammy, make it really super silky smooth, you can do that as well. At home, we usually just kind of mash it up a little bit, really not that big of a deal. You can actually trick your children into thinking it's mashed potatoes when you put it with something else too. At home, we like to do kind of like bangers and mash, so kind of sausages that have been roasted with a little bit of onions, and then we make a puree of cauliflower, and we put that on the side, and the kids can barely tell. So I'm basically just going to put these all in here. I'm going to fill it about halfway with water. I'm going to put a piece of garlic in there, season it with salt and pepper, and then we're going to steam these up.
My counter usually looks a little, I have all my kitchen tools I need to get now.
Yeah, bowl scraper. It's really useful for a lot of different things. It's mainly used for scraping the bowl out to get everything out of it, but it's also as a flat side where you can scrape the table. You can put a whole cold garlic in there, or you can smash it or chop it up. Doesn't really matter. It's all cook up there in the same. Couple that, a little bit of salt and pepper, and then we're gonna steam it up. Water or chicken stock or vegetable stock, it's up to you. Water does the trick. If you have some vegetable stock, you make your own vegetable stock at home, you can use that as well. Put down there, let that steam up a little bit. And I'm gonna make the cauliflower rice. So basically the same process. You can cut these pieces out. Does everybody have a food processor at home? A box grater or something? Yeah, food processor is super useful. I've got a KitchenAid food processor, and you want to use the grating attachment. So quiet in here. It's like
It's like so quick cutting it. Like I was just being amazed at that myself. And I just rent you to prep all my cauliflower, and I end up with bits everywhere.
Well, when I was working in France, I worked at some pretty nice places, and you actually didn't cook for a whole year. You just did vegetables. You just prepped the vegetables for other people to cook. So yeah, you get to be really good. And a lot of things we did, it's called à la minute. So everything was literally to the minute. So if you got an artichoke dish, you'd go in the back, grab an artichoke, peel the artichoke, turn the artichoke, cut the artichoke, take the inside out, and then, and it was one of those old school kitchens where you didn't use any large pieces of equipment. It all had to be done by hand. So no peelers, all done with like little tiny knives like this. So this knife actually started out about that big and just whittled down as it went down every time I sharpened it. So yeah. So food processor. You can use either the small or the large size. I usually use the larger size. Kind of makes it a little easier. Toss that on there. Open this up. So the larger size kind of gives a little bit bigger pieces, a little more forgiving when you're cooking it. If you get it really small, it's basically just going to turn to mush and kind of look like couscous or something like that, which is what we don't want.
And I will prep up a lot of it ahead of time and maybe not cook all of it at once with the cauliflower and the noodles.
Yeah, and if you don't have time, you can also just, now in grocery stores, they sell the bags already kind of cut up, ready to go. So if you're kind of in a hurry or you've got a kid's basketball game or something, you want to make something really quick, you can just go to the grocery store and actually purchase that now. A lot of places have.
My household didn't really. Yes, that's a good question. Can you prep a lot? Does it freeze? All right, so
Yeah.
you just prep a lot versus in the freezer.
Sure. Yeah, I use Ziploc bags all the time. Ziploc bags all the time. We just go to Sam's Club, get a whole big case of them, and kind of just use them as we go. Chicken thighs as well. You can freeze the chicken thighs once they're cooked, or just buy a bunch. A lot of times they're on sale. You just get a whole big family pack or something like that, and then. All right. So in the meantime, before we do that, we're going to start to, we're going to make a little kind of granola bar without granola, kind of a seed bar, if you will. All the stuff you can find at the grocery store, and a lot of the stuff we kind of just have at our house already. So unsweetened coconut flakes, pepitas or pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds. And the quantity just kind of depends on what you want. I usually use a good amount of coconut. So it's basically 1 part coconut and a 1/4 part, or 1 part all of these seeds and 4 parts coconut. And I'm going to use honey today. I know it's not, might not exactly fit into everyone's diet. I just think honey tastes a little better. It's a little more natural. You can also use maple syrup. And there's also another product called Natvia, which I wasn't able to find. It is a non-sweetened frosting, which you can buy, that you can put in there as well. But I just like honey. I think it tastes a little better. So you want to make sure the honey's a little warm for it to kind of soak up into it. You basically just mix it all together, put a little salt in it, which I already have. And then I'm just going to bake it off at like 325, 350, kind of depends on your oven. A lot of the home ovens are a little different. So you just want to make sure it's nice and brown. I'm just going to cook it off on one of these little pizza sheets. If you have a baking sheet, you can cook it up on a baking sheet. If you've got a ceramic bowl or something like that, you can do that as well.
How many did you estimate? You just you're so good at
I need like a quarter cup.
About a quarter
Yeah,
cup?
I mean,
Okay.
I do a lot kind of by feeling. So I'll put it in there and then I'll mix it up. And if I don't think it's sticky enough, I'll add a little more honey to it. But it's about a quarter of a cup. So this is basic wax paper. And I'll show you a little trick on how to make it perfectly round. So take the wax paper, fold it in half, and then find the center point. Fold it in half again, always holding that center point until you kind of get to a triangle, okay? Then you want to take the pan and find the center of the pan. Mark that off with your finger. Then you're going to cut it. Mix perfectly round circle. Woo! Yay! Yeah, it's.
So with the honey, that will make these bars paleo friendly, and we have the carb counts available. And then Jason and I also talked about some ways to replace the honey with either the Natvia that he mentioned or some of the energy syrup mixed with some xanthan gum. We'll thicken that up so that it can be used like honey.
Yeah, xanthan gum is great. Xanthan gum is awesome. You find it in a lot of different products. It's just a basic thickener. You can get it in little tiny bottles. It's a powdered form. And what you want to do is you want to get whatever liquid you're thickening. It'll thicken cold or hot. And it'll stabilize any liquid. You could also use it in a vinaigrette. If you look in the back labels of a lot of vinaigrettes that are emulsified, it'll have xanthan gum in it. It'll just take a tiny little bit. You want to blend it a lot and use a very little, tiny bit at a time. So if you want to do oil and vinegar, it'll do oil and vinegar. If you want to thicken a sugar or something like that. If you do put too much in, it will get a little bit slimy. So you want to kind of dose it as it goes along. You know, I mean, talking about like little tips of for a container like this, just a tiny tip of the knife blade as a blender's mixing or an immersion blender, and it'll thicken that up. All right, so our cauliflower is starting to steam up a little bit. That's great. So I took this pan and I just sprayed it down with a little bit of Pam or oil. Kind of makes the bottom stick to it so it's nice and stick. And then I'm just gonna put a little bit on the top of that as well. And then it's gonna be a little tricky. Sometimes it gets a little sticky. But it's kind of a cool little bar I have around the house. You know, it's not like super sugary, and it's kind of fun with seeds and stuff. It's kind of a cool little thing to make with the kids too. And you kind of want to make sure it all kind of sticks together, but not, you know, kind of runny. So it's starting to stick together a little bit. I'm going to add a little more honey to it.
Kind of like a Windex commercial. Well, landing on the ground for a minute.
Yes, we're like, whoa. Jason, can you use egg white to thicken it? as
Sure,
well? Will
sure.
that also work?
Sure. Yep, egg white will thicken. Egg white will make it nice and crispy. So it's starting to stick together a little bit. You know, and sometimes it doesn't come out all perfect every time. It's fine. You know, it'll be a little, yeah, it'll be a little crumbly sometimes. It'll kind of break off into pieces, and you know, you can kind of turn into a little granola bar kind of thing. And then I'm going to press it down with my hand. Another trick that also works is using a metal spatula that's slightly wet. It'll help it kind of break down a little bit. I think it kind of looks pretty too. It's got, you know, a little bit of the grain, a little bit of the coconut seeds in there, and the coconut. You kind of want to make sure it's all kind of packed in there so it doesn't break apart.
How thick do you make
That's just really as thick as you want it. It just kind of depends. If you have a smaller pan, you make it a little bit thicker. It'll take a little bit longer. I don't know. It's about a quarter of an inch. Kind of whatever kind of fills the pan. I'm just going to toss this in the oven while the cauliflower is cooking. And I always set timers. And I always set timers for less time than I need so I can double check it. So I'm going to set it for, let's start with 15 minutes. So in the meantime, cauliflower is steaming up. Doesn't really take that long, but you want to test for resistance in the cauliflower to make sure it's done. So, and you always want to pick the thickest part of the cauliflower, the thickest piece, because that'll be the part that's not cooked. You want to make sure it goes through and kind of comes out. I'm still feeling a little bit of resistance. And if you don't really know, then you just cut a little piece off and taste it. Still a little crunchy. Let that go a little bit longer. Get some of this stuff out of the way. Anybody have any questions so far?
Did you use the seeds again that you use?
Flaxseed, chia seed, sunflower seed, coconut, and pumpkin seeds, also known as pepitas. Those are the green ones. And this I'm pretty sure you could find in bulk quantity now at like Sam's Club and stuff like that. I mean, all those places start to have a little more of the things that were considered exotic before that aren't so exotic anymore. Cool. So now I'm going to make a pesto. Everybody made pesto before? No? Okay.
Yeah, I'm making it.
Okay. So it's super easy. It's basically, I'm not gonna put any pine nuts in it. I don't really like pine nuts in mine so much, but you can if you like. You like pine nuts? It does add a little bit of richness to it, but I don't know. I think it's a little more classic to not put pine nuts in it. So any real quantity. I'm using a little bit of basil and spinach. I kind of, basil can get quite expensive sometimes. So especially when you find it in the store, you go to the store and you get that little tiny package and it's like $5. And you're so you can cut it with a little bit of spinach, which I like to do. So it's about half and half. Use a decent Parmesan cheese. You don't need to do anything crazy. And olive oil and a little bit of garlic. So you just put the whole piece of garlic in there. And then the cheese, it's about a third of cheese. Kind of just depends. Like I said, I just eyeball it. You don't really need to make a recipe. There's a ton of recipes out there for it if you like.
Did you keep the rind on?
Yeah. Yep. It's kind of like a softer Parmesan cheese. So it doesn't really have that much of a rind on it. So I like to put the cheese and the garlic in first with a little bit of olive oil, kind of gets it going. Pinch of salt. And if you're gonna do it with pine nuts, I would go ahead and toast the pine nuts off as well. Gives a little extra flavor to it. This might be a little loud. Basil. Giving you a hard time. Just a tiny bit of water. Mix it around a little bit. Tiny bit more olive oil.
I know. All right, there we go. Toss this in here. You can make it as thick or as thin as you like, just depending on what you like to do. Season up a little salt and pepper, taste as you go along. You can also do it in the food processor, just comes out a little chunkier, just kind of depends on what style you'd like. I think our cauliflower is just about done. Nice green color, nicely mixed up.
And the pesto freezes well too, right?
Pesto freezes great.
Yeah, I
Pesto-
remember my mother would have an ice cream, I mean not ice cream, ice cube thing, would just fill it with, and then just pop it out. And
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I did some training in Italy, and I was in Pisa, and I happened to be there in the summertime. And the chef that I was working with, he bought all of his basil for the whole year at one time, and he had this banquet room, and he had like, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 15 banquet tables lined up, and he would buy, I don't know, hundreds of pounds of basil at a time. And he would get all the kitchen workers, all the family members, all the neighbors, all the cousins, all the aunts, all the grandmothers, and just line them up, and we'd just pick basil for hours and hours and hours. And then he'd make pesto with it, and then he'd freeze it for the whole year. So a couple good things about that. It was less expensive because it was most abundant. It was in season, so it tasted the best. And it was easy to do. So we did that all year long. So we just had like a huge freezer just filled with pesto that he used all year long, which I thought was pretty cool.
Pesto freezer.
Yeah. Yeah. You always got to stock your pantry with good flavorful stuff. One of the things I have in my pantry all the time is brown butter. So in France they call this beurre noisette, noisette meaning hazelnut. And it actually smells like hazelnut. I don't know if you want to pass that around, take a smell out of it. Everybody know how to make brown butter? Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of smells like hazelnuts.
There's no nuts in it. No, there's no nuts in it. It just smells like hazelnut because I know you start watering. I know.
So it's really simple. You just have to kind of take your time. It's kind of speed up and slow down. So you take some regular butter or salted butter. You cut it up into little pieces and you put it into a pot. And basically what's going to happen is the solids are going to drop down to the bottom and it's going to separate and they're going to start to burn. what you want to do is you want to stop it before it burns. So that nice little brown color on the bottom, that's how it happens. And you want to continue whisking it and put it in a big enough pot because it's going to start to foam up and bubble up. So you want to continue just whisking it on a pot. And what I like to do is I like to have another container on the side that's cold, just in case it does start to go too far. The pan is still hot, so it's going to retain the temperature and it's going to continue to cook it. So if you feel like you get to the point where it's bubbled up, it's dropped down, and it starts to brown, and you're like, oh, it's browning too fast, just put it into another container to cool it down to stop it from cooking. And then all those little, but make sure you get all those little pieces out of there.
Keep it on like low, medium.
Yeah. I mean, it'll take, if you do it low, medium, it'll take a long time. Yeah, or you could do it high and kind of watch it really quickly and then pour it off. Another cool thing to do is I add, to get a little more of that browning thing in there, it's a kind of little trick, I add dehydrated milk to it, and you get a little more, you get way more of the browning parts of it, because it's basically milk solids inside of the butter that's burning. So I should add a ton of that into it if I want to have a lot more of the brown part of it. So kind of a little chef trick. So now the cauliflower is steamed up. So I didn't put all that much water in there because the more water you put in there, the less nutrients, the more nutrients you're going to lose. So I just put just the amount of water that's going to hopefully be enough to still make a nice puree out of it. You could always add more water or chicken stock. So right now it's basically like, you saw how earlier it was a little bit crunchy. Now I can just literally pick it up with my hands and crush it up. I've got chef hands, so I can pick up hot things. Yeah. All right. That's done over here. And I'm just gonna blend it up. And all the things I do, I'm just trying to add extra flavor to it. So we're gonna put some of the brown butter in there instead of using regular butter. And it'll just kind of make it seem a little more rich. All right. And if you don't have a blender, you can use a regular potato masher for it. I would just recommend cooking it a little bit longer, and then you can just mash it up. If you don't have a blender, you can use a food processor, blend it up in the food processor. It won't get as nice and thin as in a mixer, but it still works and it's still fine. Just kind of depends on the texture you're looking for. So, over to the brown butter in there. What's that?
That's the problem I always have. It really does a lot of it.
Yeah. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of this cooking liquid in here. Basically, every time you're cooking liquid and like you blanch vegetables, all the flavor and everything is going into the water. That's why like chefs in France make stocks. So they flavor the water, and basically you're just flavoring the water to throw away. So I just like to use less water. One thing is you're not wasting the water. Second thing, all the nutrients and the flavor are going in there, which are going back into your dish. So you just want to keep on layering those flavors. Like I said, you can make this as thick as thin as you want. You could make it thicker, or you could thin it out. You could add some milk or some cream to it and actually turn it into a soup, which is really cool. And then you can garnish it with a couple, you break these little pieces down into smaller pieces, roast them off, season them up however way you like, and turn it into a soup. So you've got some pureed pieces in there, you've got some nice roasted pieces off in there, a little bit of acidity. You can add these little pieces right here that have been cured. I think these are really cool. It's kind of like a little quick pickle kind of thing. It's like my little like kitchen snack. They're like crispy and salty and acidic, which I really like. So yeah. All right, that's still going. So, like I said, it probably takes more like 25, 30 minutes, but I always play it on the safe side and put the timer on for 5 minutes less than I need to, just in case. I've never cooked out of this kitchen before, so I'm not sure how powerful the oven is yet.
Very calm with several things going on. Yeah. I love like chicken like it.
Spent a few days in the kitchen.
Yeah, I don't know, I love the way the cauliflower puree smells with the brown butter in it. It's just awesome. That freezes well as well.
Make big batches when I actually and then, yeah, we used to do a lot of cooking on Sunday, and then use whatever you use, and really some extras.
So Jason, if you freeze that, what's the best way to bring it back to?
Leave it in the refrigerator overnight. Let it kind of do its thing. It'll probably separate a little bit because there's some salt in it, and then just heat it in the microwave or heat it in a little pot to bring it back up. Yeah, it's pretty easy. Yeah, there we go. All right.
Cauliflower stuff, it all ends up tasting the same. So I like that, you're showing
Cool.
some varieties you can do.
Well, cool, yeah. And the cauliflower rice will be cool too. I'll show you how to change that up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's good. Don't need this anymore. Don't need this. Yeah, it's a nice little demo kitchen. Okay, we got that. Now we're gonna make some zoodles, vegetable noodles. Here is a basic piece of equipment that you can buy anywhere. It's pretty inexpensive. Here's the more chef version. It's a Japanese piece, all different types of attachments and things like that. If you really get serious into making your zoodles, you probably want to buy one of these. It's pretty cool. A lot of different metal attachments. You can do a lot of different things, radishes and all kinds of stuff. I basically like to use zucchini and squash. They're kind of easy, they're flavorful, and kind of stick with Mediterranean flavors. So pesto, zucchini, squash, tomatoes, that kind of thing, kind of all goes together. Any size you want, really, small or large. I tend to use a larger one, makes it a little easier. And you just...
Get good wrist muscles.
Yeah.
are a little pickier, you can peel.
Get soft and stuff on it.
Right? We always say you can pick out the longest zoodle.
Oh, look, pick the longest zoodle.
The longest one.
Jason, what is that called?
Um,
A zoodler?
that's a good question.
Spiralizer?
Spiralizer, yeah, I guess so.
Bit on like a pencil.
Yeah.
Pencil sharpener, yeah.
I think I got mine a couple years ago. Family member got it for me. She found it like, as seen on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where she got it, I think.
And back in the day, I would use a peeler and just make strips.
Veggetti.
Veggetti,
Yes, yeah.
What's it called?
It's called a veggetti, spiral vegetable slicer.
Veggetti.
Prime, it's $9.99.
There you go.
All right, yeah.
Well worth that
And
$9.99.
I'll have it on mine.
Yeah.
Swipe.
No, what's the name of it?
Veggetti,
Veggetti.
V-A-G-E-T-T-I.
Be careful how you say that.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Jason, is there an advantage to not peeling it, or like you didn't peel the skin off?
Yeah, I like the skin. I like the skin. I think it tastes
But as
good.
far as cooking, there's no advantage, or
No, I mean the inside of the zucchini or the squash will be a lot softer than the outside. So a lot of the times in some of the fancier restaurants, we'd actually only use the skin. Yeah, a lot of bigger restaurants are. I mean, restaurants can be wasteful, especially when you get into the higher end stuff. So you just want the best part of everything. I could tell you some crazy stories, but for another time. Yeah, and it'll see like the seeds start to become a little mushy in the center. So if you only did the seeds, it wouldn't really be all that great.
And when you use the one with the crank, it sort of takes out the center,
Yeah, it takes out the core, which is really cool.
so you don't get too many seeds.
is that the same as the apple core? That machine? Similar.
Yeah, that's what I have the same thing. I was thinking,
Yeah,
The cores
we have
and then-
apple cores.
Yeah.
But it's
No, this pushes it through, and it's got a blade that slices it on the back end, and then it pops the core out. So it's a little bit different.
I've also used it to make interesting things for a garnish for a veggie tray that you're bringing to maybe a fancier event. If you want to make it sort of pretty.
It's like, you always get a little bit that pushes through to the other side.
Right.
I like, it's so tightly curled, I like the little bits on the other.
These little ones.
Yeah.
All right, that's that. Pop this off to the side for the moment.
And those I will keep in the bowl because you'll probably see they go really fast to cook. So if you keep some in the fridge, you can just use them out. Do a small bit here and there, especially if you're cooking for a fewer.
All right. And then we're going to do some lettuce leaves. So we're going to turn this is called a little gem. But you can use almost any leaf you want. I just like these because they're really tight and they make really nice little leaves for putting stuff in. So one of the dishes we're going to do is we're going to take some of that chicken and make these little kind of lettuce wraps. Oh, I didn't show you how to do that. It's pretty basic though. You just snip the bottom off. Any leaves that are on the outside that are a little brown, you don't really want to use. They can be used for something. We would actually make like a lettuce puree. So we'd blanch the leaves off, then roast off some garlic, blend all that together, and then kind of put a little bit of light whipped cream into it, and make like this really awesome, like you would never expect it to be, like lettuce puree would be good. Also put a little mint and basil in there while you blanch them off. It's really cool little dish.
And do you use that, what do you use that to accentuate?
Mainly fish dishes. So when you're thinking of a dish, when I'm thinking of a dish, I always think about, you know, how much humidity the dish has and flavor. So, and I try and not waste anything as well. So if you just make that puree, make it nice and tight, put a little whipped cream into it. It's got a little mint and a little basil, and that could be the base for like a very light fish dish, where you could also add some acidity to it. Like I'd put some of those cauliflower stems that are marinated into it, or some salted cured lemon or something, and it really turns out it's something really cool, and you're like, wow, that's lettuce, you know?
You can buy the little gem here at, is it Lynchburg Rose that sells it?
Sometimes they have them. Sometimes you can go to the farmer's market in Forest, and they have them at Sandyfoot. But you don't have to use little gems. You can buy some of the stores around town have what they call like an artisan mix. You get 4 little light heads, or you can also use Boston lettuce, Boston or leaf lettuce. These are just almost, I mean, they almost all come out like pretty perfect. Like it's awesome. Put this right.
They carry those at Walmart and Kroger's, the 4 that you saw.
So, plus it makes for a quick little snack. It looks pretty. So we'll just leave those there, and then prepare some of the chicken. You want to see the chicken with the wrap next, or you want to see the cauliflower rice?
I'm just getting so hungry.
Okay,
It all sounds amazing right now.
cool. So, all right, since we got these out, we'll go ahead and do that. So these are some of the chicken thighs that I cooked off earlier, and then I cooled down and just shredded them up, super easy. And you can go almost any way you want with this. It's basically neutral. It's fairly aromatic. It's got garlic in it. It's got oregano in it. It's got some salt in it. I happen to like cilantro, so I made like a basic little cilantro dressing. Something we do at the restaurant. So lime juice, cilantro, garlic, olive oil, salt and pepper. Really, I mean, really nothing to it. Just blend it all up together. And then just wet that.
What are the rough parts of the lime juice to the olive oil?
It's basically 1 part lime juice to 3 parts olive oil. And you can break these up into smaller pieces if you like, shred it up. You can also make a chicken salad with this. You can also toss this into your cauliflower rice, which I'm going to. You can also, I mean, just do a bunch of different things. It's chicken, it's a base, it's flavorful, and you can always have it. We always have just some chicken thighs around somewhere in the house.
And did you just do that by knife and fork?
I just literally just peeled it off the bone.
Oh,
Just peel off the bone, just
like
shred it by hand, just like that. Yeah,
Okay.
it's super tender. So you can kind of just take a couple pieces of this. You have a little hors d'oeuvre party at the house or something like that, or whatever. And whenever I try and put flavor into something, I try and layer the flavor. So if I'm doing like a cilantro dressing, I'll also put some fresh cilantro on it. If I'm doing like a mint kind of cilantro dressing, I'll put mint on top of it, where you'll kind of get like the double whammy of flavor into it. So. Yeah, I love chicken thighs and a chicken salad as well. I think it's awesome. But something else could be done. Let's take some cilantro leaves. Put a little piece on top.
That looks great. The children may not appreciate that presentation, but it's fantastic.
And I'm just going to put a little burst of acidity in there with one of these little cauliflower stems. You don't have to, but it's got lemon or lime juice, and there's lemon or lime juice in the dressing. It's got cilantro in the dressing, and there's cilantro on top, so it all kind of ties in together.
It's good enough that we're smelling it, seeing it.
Cool. So there you go, a little chicken wrap, which y'all can taste afterwards. Get some of this out of your way. Okay, next I'm gonna make the cauliflower rice. I'm gonna do kind of a curry cauliflower rice with green onions, cilantro, and mint. So it kind of just takes a little different take on it. Green onions, super readily available. You can use the whole part of it. I just take off the little bottom piece like that. Another thing, it's an aromatic. So just like garlic, when I add garlic to something or adding an onion or aluminum, it just adds a little more flavor to it. Plus it's nice and fresh. Yeah, a little more. Let's do 5 more minutes. Yeah. There you go. Cool. Yeah, use the white and the green. Use the whole thing. If you want as well, you can go a little more Asian on it, and you start off with garlic, ginger, scallions, add a little soy sauce to it. You can kind of go a bunch of different ways. It's a base, so you can kind of do whatever you like.
Is there a certain time when you use the whites versus the green?
A lot of people use the green for garnishes. It's more mild than the white, and a lot of people use the base of the stem to cook or roast off. So, but in this case, it doesn't really matter. But same thing, aromatics at the beginning, the garlic, the ginger, the scallions, get that nice and steamed up if you want to go Asian style, and then add the soy sauce at the end. I'm going to put a couple little slivers of garlic in there. Take some mint leaves. You can buy mint at the grocery store. It's pretty expensive though. I recommend going to a farmer's market to pick up the mint. Cilantro is pretty readily available. You can find that almost anywhere. It's pretty inexpensive. But the mint and the basil and stuff like that, you kind of want to go to a farmer's market to get it. You can eat all of the cilantro. You can eat all of it. I just basically try and pick off like the bigger pieces. Just makes it a little easier.
It's super easy to grow.
Yeah, it's just very prolific.
Make sure it has a yeah, I'm gonna say basil. Basil grows well.
Yeah, this season of basil was awesome. I had people calling the restaurant all the time like, got a ton of basil, you want it? It was crazy. People just drop it off, or people just tell me their address. They're like, I live at 102, whatever. Like, you want some basil? Come pick it up. I just open up the gate and come behind the house and pick it up. And it's like, I don't know. I know it's pretty safe here, but
Your neighbors won't.
yeah. And when I do a lot of cooking, I try and get all of the stuff I need done before I actually need it. So I'll pick all this stuff, and then once it's all ready, I'll saute off the cauliflower. And I'm just going to give a rough chop to it. Nothing really crazy. The more you chop it up, the less you're going to taste it. So I just try and make sure you taste it all. Now the cauliflower rice is, it cooks pretty quickly as well since it's very thin, and it just depends on how much you want it cooked and what the texture you like to it. I like it a little bit crunchy, kind of just depends on how you like it. You can also make a stir fry with this using an egg. So you can do, same thing, you do garlic, ginger, scallions, saute that up, and you can either transfer that to another pan and add an egg to it and scramble that up and toss it back into it, or do it all together. So it's kind of like a stir fried rice or egg white. So I'm going to use medium heat, a little bit of olive oil. Little salt and pepper. I'm going to put the garlic and the scallions in there first. Still heating up a little bit. And you want to cook the garlic until it starts to become fragrant, but you don't want to burn it. It'll become a little bitter. All right, so this is starting to get where I want it to be. Starting to turn a little brown. It still seems a little moist to me. We'll just see how it cools down. We'll go from there.
How long has it been in up to now? About?
I started out with 15 minutes. I think I added 4 or 5 increments.
Okay.
So yeah, it's
Somewhere around 35 minutes. Depends on the oven.
depends on the oven.
Yeah.
Like some ovens say they're at 325, but they're really 350. Some say 325, they're really 300. So it all kind of just depends. Let's see. Anybody need a break? How are we doing on time?
I think we're doing well. Last I checked, should be at 11:30. Yeah.
Cool.
1:06.
We're just finishing it up.
Spectacular. You doing okay, Dave? I might just grab the microphone. See if I can do this.
So the oil's starting to heat up. Start to hear a little sizzle. It's getting nice and fragrant.
While, oh, is that too loud? Is that okay? While he's cooking up, I do want to thank Dr. Elizabeth Mumper and Advocates for Children for allowing us to use this fantastic kitchen. And also an arcade is our mobile arcade out there for the kids. And so I just wanted to put that in because I forgot to mention it earlier. Thanks.
I'm just adding some of the shredded chicken thighs we did earlier to the cauliflower rice. Yeah.
Scramble it ahead of time.
little curry powder. A little curry powder. Yeah, sometimes just regular cauliflower rice is a little boring.
Is one boring, but I'm not, so then you can kind of mix it up a little bit. So you have something. There you go. Yeah.
Just steamed up like that. You know, it really doesn't take that long. There's enough humidity inside of the cauliflower that it's going to steam up itself. And then once it's done cooking, I'm just going to toss in the cilantro and the mint at the very last minute. I don't want to say I want to disguise the cauliflower, but at the same time, you know, you can fool some people into thinking this is rice with the cilantro and everything in there. So there's that dish right there. Cool, that's good. All right, and now we're gonna make the zoodles. I'm gonna put a little bit of wilted spinach at the bottom. So I take a piece of garlic and I infuse the oil with the garlic. Use a whole clove, just imparting more and more flavor into it. Is there a... Is there just a regular fork?
I was realizing that we did not pull out utensils.
We have plenty. There's plenty of plastic utensils.
Okay.
I use my hand a lot because my hands are used to the heat. But another thing you can do is just put a piece of garlic onto a fork and season it like that. It's fine. It works.
I remember there being utensils.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyway.
Cool.
They migrate to that kitchen.
Oh, okay.
So medium heat. Put some spinach in there. And the spinach goes really quickly, so you don't really need a lot of heat. I only had it on there for a couple seconds. And I don't like it really mushy, so I take it out when it's almost half cooked and it'll almost continue to cook on the plate. And then, Here it is. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the pesto that I previously made, and usually I like to thin it out with a little bit of water when I'm tossing the noodles into it. So you kind of get it into like a, like a saucy consistency. And then those noodles. And these are going to cook really quickly, so I basically do it like off the heat. If you need to add a little more heat into it, you can at the end. Just moving back and forth with the heat, without the heat.
Oh. So it won't get over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they are so thin, and zucchini and squash cook really quickly. So I'll just put it on the heat, take it off the heat, let it kind of cool down a little bit. Continuing to add a little more heat. I'll just try one, see if it's cooked enough. I think we're done.
Sometimes I will use a scissor to make it a little more manageable.
Yes, we do.
All right. I've got a microplane. You can also use a cheese grater. Right, because you want to make it look like a pasta dish, so. There's that.
I'm sure his wife might have some.
All right, and then I'm just going to plate up the chicken thighs, and then we can taste. So just to recap a little bit, so we've got our curried cauliflower rice with mint, cilantro, and green onions. We've got some of the chicken thighs, which are here, which can be transformed into very, very many different things. Super easy to do. One of the things we transform them into is this little lettuce wrap. We've got the cauliflower puree with the brown butter, and the zoodles with pesto, cheese, and wilted spinach. And yeah, just wanted to show you a couple. What's that? And the bars at the end. I think they're still cooling down a little bit. Yeah, I might be able to cut now. But super easy, inexpensive ingredients that can be transformed into a lot of different things. You could also add chicken to this one, use this one, turn the chicken to a chicken salad. I added chicken to this, kind of go across the board. And it's simple and easy and stuff that you could find everywhere. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Jason Arbusto from Daughters and Sons Pizza on 5th Street. So really appreciated having you, and your expertise is invaluable. So does anybody have any last questions before we wrap up and get to eat? No, let's just go eat. Okay, great. Thanks again.